Thank you.
Happy Democracy Day, everyone. And thank you very much for that very kind introduction. It's great to see so many people and people who have gone ahead of myself. So delighted to see Mrs. Cecilia Ibru in the audience. And I remember years ago when we were trying to privatize NITEL, and we reached out to you, and you did offer me assistance. And I think as a younger woman, pulled me close to you as a professional, and I am ever grateful for that. Thank you very much, madam. And I think that's the wonderful thing about our society and the ability of us all as Nigerians on a day like this to pull ourselves together for the improvement of ourselves and for the improvement and for the development of our economy. And it is, each one, pull many as you can in your circle of influence that will ultimately make a difference. Entrepreneurship, the way forward. What I'd like to do is take the time to tell a little bit of my story and how I got here. Talk about the road, some of the challenges, the opportunities, what I see, and then I'll leave a few minutes for some Q&A so we get the opportunity to get some questions in. My story, born in Ibadan, Queen's School, what is now Obafemi Awolowo University, my youth service, and then I went to the United States for a master's degree. At the time I was leaving, Nigeria was going through some structural adjustment. It was in the early 80s, similar times. The opportunities were few and far between, and I decided to stay on because there were no jobs for me to come back to in Nigeria after my master's degree and stay on in the United States and pursue my career opportunity. Fast forward about 23 additional years later, after my graduating from my master's program, opportunities in telecommunications, which was the space I was in, started opening up with liberalization in Nigeria. And I had the opportunity to meet the leadership of MTN, who interviewed me and brought me back to Nigeria as Chief Technical Officer. Now, I had not worked in Nigeria for more than 20 years since my youth service, and it was a really difficult adjustment. I also felt as a Nigerian who was coming back to give back to Nigeria, it just was not the right platform for me to give back in the way I felt I wanted to. So I thought we needed more infrastructure. There's still a fundamental problem with infrastructure. This infrastructure is not capable of serving the needs of the number of people we have in this country with quality and affordable price. And so we took on NITEL, and I was approached to look at how we could privatize NITEL and make it an institution that would work for all Nigerians. We tried that for about a year. Unfortunately, you get to learn through trying to privatize a government agency in partnership with government a lot of why Nigeria doesn't work. But in all this time I was back in Nigeria, the internet, which really had taken off during my career in the United States, was continuing to explode globally. And we barely had access to the internet in Nigeria. And I knew some of the critical infrastructure that was missing. So I had met Mr. Fole Adeola when we were trying to privatize NITEL. And he said, oh, well, I will help you to start a business. You have to do something that reflects your values. Why don't you go out and try to do that? And I came back and said, I really think we need a submarine cable, a private submarine cable, so we could connect Nigeria and West Africa better with the rest of the world. And he said, you got to be crazy. How much is that? I said, $300 million. He said, what? He said, no, that's what government does, or big companies like MTN. We're not going to take that on. And I said, well, give me some time. Let me come back to you. But I really think that's what we need to do. And that's the gap here. And that's where the opportunity lies. And anyway, cut a long story short, we raised $240 million. We built the cable from 2008 to 2010, and we put the submarine cable in service. That submarine cable It was the first private submarine cable to be landed in West Africa, served all the major telcos except Glo, who was also building their cable and came in shortly after us. But even then, we've provided services to them till today. So providing service to MTN, Airtel, Etisalat, and all the smaller ISPs, essentially starting off the data revolution in Nigeria. We do the same in Ghana, where we're serving all the large operators. And in addition, we are delivering data capacity into about 8 countries across West Africa today. So that is my personal story. I thought when MainOne went into service that I would kick back and relax because there would be so much demand for data, and we wouldn't have to push the business, but the demand will self-generate revenue for us. We put in place the structures to operate the business efficiently, and I thought it would be a picnic, but I've never had to work harder than I have subsequent to the cable going into service than I actually had before the cable getting in. But clearly, when I look at the story of Nigeria and I look at what I set out to do, which I could not have done with some very good mentors and leadership, I think it's what fuels the need for entrepreneurship in our society. There's so much opportunity, there's so much need here that we need to transform our society. When you look around us, there's no one's going to do it for us. And we also have to get our government on board with us to meet the aspirations of Nigerians, because that's what democracy is all about. But especially on a day like this, when you look at how are we going to address the problems, I like that some of the issues that were raised or some of the elevator pitches talked about education. When you talk about education, when you talk about feeding, when you talk about healthcare, when you talk about all kinds of services, transportation, unless we start addressing them as Nigerians, there's no manna from heaven. And then there's some large infrastructure areas like power that we still need addressed as well. So it really calls for the need for entrepreneurship. I met this morning, chairman of one of the privatized power companies already, and we were talking about the challenges they face as private companies and as Nigerians who have taken those companies on, and how difficult it is, and how really only Nigerians can take on those challenges and meaningfully address them. You know, expatriates who come to this country for an opportunity, presumably an easier opportunity than the countries they're coming from, are not going to deal with those issues. And what he said is, it's like dealing with a leaky bucket. He says, you're plugging one and the other one is leaking. He says, and we're doing that all the time. He says, it is very draining physically to do that. But really, we as Nigerians are the ones who are going to take these opportunities, take the bulls by the horns, especially at times like this when there's no capacity in the system. I think for many years, and being in business in Nigeria has really given me cause to reflect on the challenges of Nigeria and say, where are we where we are? And it's because we had trickle down. Some of the economists today say it's because we had almost too much. The oil money was being shared from the top. So there was no incentive to add value, no incentive to address the basic needs. When one of those holes were leaking, the government just took some oil money and put a short-term panacea to address that problem, rather than really thinking creatively and getting the best of us as Nigerians to address those problems and putting sustainable solutions. And so that's a cry for entrepreneurship today. We talk about oil and the declining oil economy. Oil is declining. The usage of power in advanced markets is declining because they're getting more energy efficient and they're providing more energy of their own because they have those same resources. So it's going to be up to us to start looking at areas of need, not just in Nigeria, but on a global basis, and organizing ourselves and putting our skills together and our resources together in order to create that value, which is what an entrepreneurship does. And in return for that value, then you accumulate wealth and you start providing capital to feed other businesses. So I'm going to start my narrative on the issues of capital. I always tell people raising money is the most difficult thing I ever did as an entrepreneur. And in this environment today, raising money is the most difficult thing I ever did. Every entrepreneur has to raise capital. If your business is going to grow, you have to raise capital. You have to be smart about raising capital. You have to be determined about raising capital. But what I also find about raising capital in Nigeria is because of the informality of our society, because of the way it works, you actually have more informal structures to raise capital to get started if you're pragmatic and realistic than you have in more advanced markets. In advanced markets, you want to start a small business, you write a business plan, you go to the bank. In Nigeria, you write a business plan, you start doing your business, you show some real commitment, passion, the ability to execute, and then you go to friends and family and try to raise your capital. Can someone get me my purse, please, so I can get a handkerchief? The lights here are killing me. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. No, just bring the purse. Oh, okay, that's fine. All right. Thank you. All right. Okay. So you have friends and family, and you can raise capital. For me at MainOne, the first money we raised was $3.2 million, and we raised it from friends and family. You don't need $3.2 million, and I see a lot of young, you don't always need $3.2 million. No. We were doing a project that ultimately was $240 million, but that $3.2 million was some of the most difficult money I raised, which was just over 1.5% of what we required. But what I said is, it was like you started climbing a hill and you are on the incline. You couldn't go back. So once you started, you had to get to the top of the hill. And that's really what I did. But what I find with a lot of young entrepreneurs, it's the same thing. You write your prospectus, you shop around your business plan, you deal with valuation. You need to be pragmatic. You need to continue executing. The kind of capital you take, the terms under which you take that capital can kill you. And then the thing I always realized was, it was the results I was getting that allowed me to raise that capital. So some people just say, if only I could get this big pot of money, then I could execute. What I see from the entrepreneurs who I see succeeding, they continue executing and they use their resourcefulness to demonstrate capacity. And it's that capacity that ultimately brings the capital they need to the business. People are investing because they think they can put money in your business and make that money back. And that is the story of capital. So capital is really difficult in our environment. You have to execute. Raising capital is probably going to be something you live with for a very long time. So don't expect quick fixes. But if you're getting the results and you're demonstrating the capacity to generate wealth and pay a return, then you will ultimately raise the capital. And it may not be the first offer that comes calling, but eventually you will get the right kind of capital to help you grow your business. Because there's some that's the wrong kind of capital as well that gets you constrained, ties up all your equity. You can't sell to anybody else or bring other capital into the business because the conditions they've put in are too onerous and they stifle your ability to grow. The other issue is we have a very unorganized or chaotic marketplace in Nigeria. What do I mean by that? For anything you're trying to do, there are 1,000 other people trying to do the same thing. Even if it costs $1 billion, every idea is, from people who have absolutely no capacity to execute, but have a brother in government or a friend who knows something, to the people who genuinely have the capacity to execute, everybody's doing the same thing. So it becomes very difficult. And we're also a very big society where we don't have a lot of formal structures. So if you're growing a business, you have to be very deliberate, and you have to do your homework on who exactly has the capacity to buy, how much money do you need, where should you prioritize your efforts. That person who came yesterday and said, let me introduce you to my brother, the senator, the governor, is that really how your business is going to grow? Or if you're trying to sell food products to consumers, you need to really go focus on how you get more of those consumers on your website so that they can actually buy those products. So because of the noise in the environment, it tends to distract a lot of people, and people tend to get derailed. And so for us also, it's very important that we prioritize who are the big customers. Everybody says, why don't you do retail? Why don't you sell to ISPs? Why don't you sell to home consumers? To do that, we have to make an investment of not $240 million, but $2.4 billion, which is 10 times what we have for any of the GSM companies that are being successful today. Until we have that kind of capital lined up, and after you have 4 of them in the market, does it make sense to go after that space, or it makes sense to go after the space where there's not as much competition? So you really have to pay attention to the marketplace and what your role is and where you're going to create value and get the impact you need to generate the cash to keep your business running. Another one is the rule of law. You know, in Nigeria, it's very difficult to enforce contracts. So be it the supplier who's supposed to come in 30 days, who doesn't come in 90 days, or the person who said they would give you a service or build something for you by next week and then they don't show up, or the customer that you deliver services to and then does not want to pay you your money. So you have to be, you know, as they say, shine your eye as you're doing business, that you're not making careless mistakes in terms of how you're engaging third parties, what kind of commitments you make, that they are enforceable and sustainable, because a single commitment that is not properly executed could tear your business down. And we've been very mindful of that in how we go about our businesses, that we don't sign bad contracts, and we only sign contracts, or we limit our risk to what we can actually afford so that we don't have big surprises. Finally is the issue of enabling environment. And I tell people, after doing it, I think doing business in Nigeria is a lot more challenging than in other parts of the world. Now, of course, there are opportunities here, because we haven't fully developed our society, that are not available elsewhere as well. So it's a risk-reward type situation. But when you look at the skills, if you're an employer of labor that you're hiring, when you look at things like even the capacity of your employees to get to work on time on a rainy day in Lagos, when you look at the commitment, I was in the office earlier this morning. One of my employees said to me, I just wanted to let you know that I will be leaving in August because I have decided to go back for a master's in the United States. Of course, looking for greener pastures. I said, do you intend to come back? He said, no. My intention would be to seek employment after I get that degree. So it's not, I mean, I wished him well. I thanked him for letting me know on time so we can plan to backfill him. But it is a challenging environment. And so the degree of instability, the degree of logistical challenge that an entrepreneur, the average entrepreneur, faces in this society to be successful is quite daunting. But then there are needs and the opportunity to make a difference. And I say to people, if I stayed in the United States, I would never have had the opportunity to build a submarine cable, to bring wholesale internet to all these people, to build the premier data center. There's so many big, better capitalized companies who are in a much better position to do that and build this kind of fundamental infrastructure. And so it's everything around us, from tutoring to education, all these areas that we talk about. There's certainly, with 180 million people in Nigeria, the opportunity to make a difference, to live an imprint of the world. And that's why it is worthwhile and interesting to be an entrepreneur here. Not because it's easier, but because the opportunities do exist, and they are available to all of us as Nigerians to seize the moment and move forward. Now, creating value is very fulfilling. Obviously, you need to pay the bills. How much money you actually make is a different thing, but it cannot just be motivated by money, because as I mentioned, it is a very difficult thing to be an entrepreneur here. What I find is that you need to find your passion or something you can do better than everyone else. If you're going to win in this very noisy market that we talked about, in this market where capital is hard to come by, it had better be something that you're prepared to keep doing when everybody else has given up, or something that you're going to keep refining and doing better than everyone else, so that at the end of the day, you can distinguish yourself. There's just no way about it. So a lot of people just say, copycat, so-and-so is doing it, so I'm going to do it. You don't know what those challenges are. 3 to 6 months later, you're going to crumble. You really need to ensure that you're either better or committed to being better than everyone else and being the very best at that thing, or you have a deep-seated passion and knowledge that you bring to that space so you can truly excel. There will be challenges. So in addition to all the ones we've said, our environment is such that you step out every day and there is a new challenge. And even for me, we're in the 7th year of operation now, the 9th year of doing this business. I can tell you every day brings a challenge that was totally unanticipated. And you say, do I really have to deal with this now? Can I really cope with this challenge? But then, if you give up, you never get the prize. So you have to keep going, and you have to have a passion and a commitment to keep going. And the final thing I would say is, don't think that, quote unquote, successful entrepreneurs do not have challenges. I don't know anyone you can talk to, be it the Richard Bransons or the Bill Gates of this world. And one of the things that I like doing is reading biographies of other rich people. Steve Jobs, leaving Apple and having to come back, being fired by a board that he put together, and the business really going down before they came back again. So one of the key things you have to realize that it's not that you will not have setbacks, it's not that you will not have discouragement, and it's not that people who are successful in business have not experienced similar setbacks. It is that at the end of the day, they persisted in achieving a vision, in delivering a solution, in meeting a need better than anyone else, and ultimately they were successful. Thank you very much.